How's it going, guys? So we're going to be talking about price and payment structure of a DME business when acquiring. Okay, so how much does a DME cost? So DME cost is kind of in the ballpark of 140 to 180,000. It really just depends on the seller. Some sellers ask for more, some for less. Because we manage the deal, we always try to find the happy medium, right? So the prices that you can expect are really in that range. Now, what payment options are available? So 99% of the time, unfortunately, it needs to be a cash payment. So what that means is financing isn't really an option. It's very, very rare where someone asks for financing and they get financing. So if you're looking for financing, unfortunately, this is not the type of business because of how low of a ticket business it is to acquire. Like if you were acquiring a pharmacy of $1 million, you would probably be able to get some financing and the seller would be fine. Most of the time, these guys that are selling these DMEs, 150, 200,000, they're not really looking for financing. They just want a cash deal and just get it out of the way and transfer it over. Now, can you submit a lower offer on a DME? Absolutely. If you think that maybe the price could be a little lower and you think that most of the time there isn't that much space realistically. When we push out a price, let's say it's 170, and it's not the most common thing that they accept it, but they can accept it. And I always think everyone should try and get, a better bang for their buck. Now, what exactly are you buying when you're looking at this durable medical equipment company? For people that don't know what they're buying, so everyone thinks it's kind of like a shell company, but it is not. It's a fully operational, not operational, but it can be fully operated from the moment of acquisition. So what you're buying is a company that is fit with the equipment and the facility to be able to bill Medicare. Inside that company, it's all the policies and procedures, all the insurance is already active, all the equipment, a fully fitted office, printers, just everything you need to be able to bill Medicare and take care of those patients. Now, what product categories are included in these companies? So that tends to vary, and a lot of times people want different things. So let me give you an example. If you're looking for oxygen, it's very rare to find oxygen. We can pull some strings and try to get a product category on there, but most of the time you're going to find a few of the more common product categories, which would be SO1, surgical dressings, Oro3, which is braces. You have PDO6 and PDO7, I believe, or PDO5, which, if I'm not mistaken, it is CGMs. Those are the most common ones. So if those are product categories you're looking to disperse or looking to build on, those are the most common ones you'll find. Anything else, you kind of have to, occasionally you'll find one that has, something a little different, but that's kind of what you'll find most of the time. So let's talk about timeline and process. So how long these transactions take and what the process looks like. So how long does a build out take? So a build out tends to take between 5 and 7 months, 4 to 6 months. It's kind of in between. It really just depends on the regulation, how fast they want to move things along. Now, let's say you're acquiring one. People tend to always ask, how fast can I bill? So billing, the moment that you acquire the company and you acquire the bank account, the bank account transfer happens usually a few days after closing. So if your closing is on the 10th of the month, you're usually acquiring the bank account in the next 2 business days over. Now, what's involved in the change of ownership process? So the change of ownership process, it's a very, very simple process, but it's very meticulous. So you need to kind of do it correctly because if not, it can be denied. This process usually takes 1 to 2 months, depending on the state. Again, regulations tend to, slow things up, but it'll take about a month or two, and it's just changing all the information on the back-end system of PICOS, which is the system where all of the accounts run through. Once you change that, you have to send an application, almost like you're applying for Medicare, or you're applying for a change of ownership. And that process, it can be done in about an hour or two, but it needs to be done correctly. It's very, very specific. Any little mistake can get it denied. Let's talk about location and relocation of a DME company. So DME companies can be relocated. Now, the thing is, when you buy a DME and you want to, let's say, move it somewhere else, in state or out of state, you need to have already acquired a lease for that new location, and then you need to send in a change of information. Change of information is you're changing information inside the system of the whole company. So if I want to change the address, I need to send that in. And what happens is, once you send that in, they will do an inspection on the new facility. So it's very important you have a new location already. So when you do send in that change of location, it can go through smoothly, and it is very possible. It's not the most common thing, but it is very possible that you buy a DME, let's say South Florida, and you move it up to North Florida for your convenience. Do I need a physical office or can I work from home? So you do need a physical office. It is part of CMS regulations that in order to operate and bill Medicare, you need a physical location where patients can walk in and you can service. And there's no way around this. Unfortunately, you cannot operate remote, as CMS does not allow that. What are the office requirements? So The office requirements, and this is a CMS requirement for your office. There's about 200 and something requirements, specific requirements. One of them being like a mirror on the wall, certain documents on the wall. There's so many of them that I think this video would be 40 minutes long. There's a lot of them. We handle these things when there's a build out or an acquisition. We'll make sure all these things are in line. So how do I acquire patients to build revenue? So patients and acquiring patients, not the most complex thing, but it does have some difficulty to it depending on where you're at. So let me give you an example. If you are a physician or you work with a physician group or you have some connection to physicians of some sort, you're going to have a lot easier time as someone that doesn't, because you can essentially build a referral network. Now, if you don't have that referral network, there's a lot of ways of acquiring patients where there's almost like conventional marketing methods and there's door knocking, which is where you essentially go and, knock on doctors' offices and then try to build a relationship with them so they can refer patients and you can service your patients. Now, which of these you do really depends on how you run your business and, if you're drop shipping or if you're doing something state specific, but there's a lot of ways of doing it. And I think connections and relationships are the most important things in this sense. Can I buy a list of patients? So just to make that simple, no, that's illegal. You cannot buy patients of any sort. You can't buy leads of any sort. Well, you can, but there's very specific requirements. Most of the time, it's not following CMS guidelines, and this can get you in a lot of trouble. So anybody selling you patients or anything of that nature, even if it's worded that way, I would not pay any mind to it. It's very, very dangerous. You're violating a lot of law. So I would not do that. What's the typical revenue potential? So DMEs the industry has a enormous amount of revenue potential. In any corner you can make money. I think the most important thing, it's doing things correctly. Compliance is the most important thing in this industry. But just to give you some examples so you have a gauge. So if you're billing patients for a brace, let me give you an example, a knee brace. Each knee brace is dispersing $1,100 on average, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, depending on the state. So imagine billing 300 patients per month. Your cost on that material or that product is around $100 to $200. So you're making pretty significant margins. Even after your rent and your employee, you're still making a significant margin. You can make a lot of money, and that's only one product category. So almost being like a full-fledged DME, offering all types of products and rentals and things of that nature, you can make a lot of money. But once again, compliance is everything. Let's talk about operations and compliance. So do you need an employee? You absolutely need an employee. It's Medicare regulation that if you don't have an employee sitting in your office, whether it's you or somebody else, they can do a random site visit, and this site visit can get your license revoked. So you need to have one, an employee to sit there and be available, and two, one to be able to manage operations. Who's going to handle all the phone calls, all the returns, and handle walk-ins when there are walk-ins. So you need an employee, mandatory. What happens during Medicare site visits? So Medicare does a site visit when you're getting your initial Medicare P10, your license. Now, they can do random site visits, but that initial site visit is essentially not so much like an inspection. It's more about a verification. All they're doing is verifying insurances, that your company's information all lines up. The company and your surety bond needs to match the company and your SOS. So things of that nature, but they essentially just verify. Now, they can't do random site visits. And these site visits, they'll do it, depending on many different factors. It could be random. Maybe you got a complaint and they want to check and see what your facility looks like because maybe you're not doing a good enough service. But usually those site visits tend to be random, and there's no way to really tracking if they can or will or won't happen. Can you do drop shipping? Yes, you absolutely can do drop shipping. It's actually a very common way of running your business. People tend to drop ship a lot of CGMs and braces and other products, catheters. So drop shipping is a very, very interesting way to operate your business. And the thing about drop shipping that's good is that you can actually ship out of state. So a lot of people have this misconception where your DME only works for state specific. So you get a DME and the DME only works in Florida. That's not the case. When you apply for Medicare, you actually apply for the max amount of states. I believe it's 43 states. So essentially, if you're in Florida and you have a patient in California, you can ship them a brace in California. As long as you're not violating any specific regulations in California, you can essentially ship them. So it essentially opens up your doors to having a vast amount of patients anywhere. So let's talk about building a DME versus buying one. Why would I spend $170,000 when I can just build one with us for $70,000? So this question comes a lot from newer people in the industry. And I think the answer just depends on your circumstance and your situation. So if you want to build a DME, it's usually when you have a lot more time, and time isn't really like an of the essence type thing. You kind of like take your time and build your business slow. Now, some people are already operating and they don't want to wait 6 months, 7 months, 8 8 months, they prefer to just buy one. Now, what I recommend is if you're going to buy one, you need to have patients rotating already. That's the most important thing. And if you're going to build them from the ground up, you probably want to have a good plan behind it. That's my recommendation. How much time am I saving when I buy a DME versus building one? So to buy one, on average, they'll cost you between $150,000 and $200,000. But when you build one, it'll cost you about $65,000 to $75,000. Now, if you're currently operating and you have a massive patient base and you're not billing these patients, not billing those patients for 6 months, it'll probably run you more. You'll essentially lose more potential profit than just buying one for 150 grand. So if that's you, I would recommend buying one. Why is the DME so expensive? We get this question so frequently, I couldn't even tell you how many times we get it. Now, the price of the DME really depends on a lot of factors. One, what the seller wants to take, plus our fee. Now, our DMEs, there's a very good chance they're a little more expensive than the things on the market, and there's a very good reason for that. So we have a very strong due diligence process. When people buy DMEs from us, they never have a single problem with them ever. We make sure to vet the sellers correctly. The biggest fear in the DME industry is that someone buys one of these companies and the P10 gets revoked for whatever reason. That has never happened in our history, and we've sold over 50 of these things. So imagine, we're essentially selling you safety. Safety that is very expensive because we've had horror stories, other associates where they've bought a DME and the DME got revoked 2 months after, and they essentially lost out on 150 grand. So imagine paying another 10, 15 grand to not have that situation and have some level of guarantee. So when people come to us and they say, hey, your DME is too expensive, our service is absolutely priceless. I'm looking for a DME with no revenue. I hear this all the time, and I think it's a fair request. But the thing is, DMEs that have existing patients, they actually never get sold. They get continuously operated until they essentially diminish. You're never going to find a DME that is not in the millions in price point with patients. Unfortunately, that's where we're at. And people tend to come to us and they say, hey, I want to buy a DME for $210,000 and I want it to have X amount of revenue, X amount of patients. That's just not the case. A DME license on its own, billed $0, is worth what it's worth based on market numbers. So if you're looking for a DME with revenue, you need to understand that there's a big gap between that price point and the company you're looking for. And it's probably around $1 million. So if you want something to revenue, you want to shoot a little higher because of the $200,000 price point, you're just not going to find it. How do I know this company is not a scam? Now, I'm sure everyone has this level of concern when acquiring a company, especially a company that has a government license and, in an industry that there isn't so much information on. Now, how do you know it's not a scam? I'll give you this. You can physically come and see any of our listings personally, and we will be there. We will show face, we will show you documentation, we will show you everything you need to see. Every single company we sell is extremely vetted. Every seller is vetted. They have industry experience. So when these companies get sold and they get listed, it's 100% a valid company, and it is exactly what we say it is. If you want to save time, I absolutely recommend you buy a DME, because building one, as great as it sounds, and you do get a price cut, you need to have a lot of patience. Because think about it like this, and this tends to happen a lot more frequently than people think. People build a DME and sometimes they don't even know what they're doing, and they end up making a mistake. That mistake leads them to failing some sort of inspection and accreditation. That failure on its own will add another 2 or 3 months to your timeline. We've been doing this for a long time. Usually our times are pretty concrete, 4 to 6 months at most. But sometimes people, they do this on their own and they think, oh, it can't be that difficult. But think about it like this. Medicare compliance changes every month. There's new things, new documents, and new procedures that need to be put in place. We're on top of these things so frequently that we can catch them, but most people can't. As it's our job to do this and be on top of these things, it's a lot easier for us. But think about it. You wouldn't want to have an extension of your timeline by 3 to 6 months or even a year. I've seen some DMEs even take a year and a half because of mistakes. So think it through when you're going to build one or purchase one, because it could be a very, very time and money saving decision.